Hello everyone and welcome to Pascal's Wager after round 7 of the Candidates 2020 tournament. Surprising round today, I guess. MVL coming up with a very big win against Nepomniachtchi, and that puts him in a tie for first place. Jan Nepomniachtchi, who had looked so far unstoppable, went for a pretty risky opening today and was not rewarded for it, obviously, since he lost in pretty convincing manner. We're going to go through the game. That's definitely the game of the day. The other three games, as you can see on the scoreboard here, were draws. Hard-fought draws, but draws, not games where there was someone had obvious, huge, pardon me, winning chances. But really, the game of the day is MVL. Coming up with a big win, playing against the French defense. We're going to go through this game, which is definitely the game of today. Let's take a look quickly at the standings, just so you can see. Here we go. So in the standings now, we have a tie for first, MVL, and Jan Nepomniachtchi with 4.5 out of 7, plus 2. And then we have a pack of people with 50%. That includes Fabiano, Anish, Giri, Wang Hao, and Alexander Grischuk. They are, by the way, these standings are in order of tie breaks. I forget exactly how the tie breaks work, but they are in order of who has the best tie break. And then, closing out the standings are Dingley Ren and Alexeyenko with -2, and they did face each other today in a game where Dingley Ren really seems not to be himself, in my opinion. He normally has played much more solidly and much more accurately. He just, something's off. I did also want to show you a couple of things that happened on Twitter. You may have seen, or you may not have seen, I don't know. You may have seen that the Chess Olympiad, just like the Sport Olympics, has been postponed to 2021. I don't think they said exact dates, or I don't know if it's going to be exactly the same dates in 2021. Of course, you also wonder if that means there's going to be Olympiads in 2021 and 2022. But I do believe that would be the case, because I don't think they're going to postpone the next one. They'll just go with it. So we might have Olympiads 2 years in a row. From my perspective, amusingly enough, I've been considering potentially rejoining the Olympiad team for Canada, and so this may give me a chance to get the games. You have to play a certain number of games, so now I just may have a shot. And so today in our commentary, by the way, I meant to mention this. We had really a great team of commentators today. Of course, Jan Gustafsson, as always, kind of hosting the show, I would say, our host. He was joined today by Magnus Carlsen, who is back from betraying the English commentary team and spending a day with the Norwegians. So he was on our Norwegian broadcast yesterday and came back to English today. And so he was back. And then we were also joined for the first time, I believe, as a commentator on Chess 24, David Howell, very strong English chess player, who actually played against Wang Hao in the Grand Swiss and was tied for first at the very end. So he came as close to making this Candidates tournament as you can, and just narrowly missed out. And so a very strong player. He was great in the commentary. But anyway, funny moment that happened here that I wanted to highlight. Jan said, even though it's sad news for most of us that the Chess Olympiad has been postponed to 2021, will that give the ECF, which is the English Chess Federation, time to recognize they just need you on the team, Lawrence? And of course, David Howell had a quick retort here. We are looking for a cheerleader. Lawrence often gets picked on a little bit by these amazingly strong players. He's of course very good himself. A couple more things. At the end of the Anish Giri Grischuk game, they were asking what they thought of the position in Nepomniachtchi Giri, and we see both Nepomniachtchi here, who had his eyes wide open and sort of shaking his head, not very happy, as always, sort of sporting the man bun here. And so Grischuk says, if you put a knife to my throat, I would say white is winning, but I'm not sure. And then Giri says, if you put a knife on Alexander's throat, I will say that white is winning. So so Nepomniachtchi definitely was not one with a poker face today. He was clearly very unhappy with his position. And then finally, FIDE did tweet something that I thought was important. This is in relation to regulations that just came out of Russia that sort of they went a little bit stricter today. They announced, I guess Vladimir Putin announced stricter regulations about gatherings and basically forcing, like much of the rest of the world, basically forbidding large gatherings. So FIDE here released a statement. I'm not going to walk you through the whole statement, but essentially they're changing the measures in the playing hall and restricting entry to the playing hall to only like the most immediate officials and players, and maybe a few players, a few of the players' teams, but basically not a lot of people left in there. And so as such, this tells me that at least it looks like they're continuing to move with the tournament. It's been kind of weird listening to these player interviews where the players themselves seem to be questioning whether the tournament would go on. Dingley Ren in particular today, and Alexeyenko, they were both, of course they're both at the end of the standing, so their incentive is certainly not to necessarily have the tournament finish, but they both, Dingley Ren in particular, was saying that he hopes the tournament ends soon, which, at this point I feel like the high likelihood is that they're going to try to complete it, barring, someone getting sick or something like that, where they already have regulations that stipulate that if one of the players does get, sick, then they would stop. So, but so far that doesn't seem to have happened. So, let's go through today's game of the day between MVL and Jan Nepomniachtchi. There was a little bit of a discussion here between Magnus and Jan in the early broadcast about whether Nepomniachtchi is just feeling, is feeling like he can take a risk here because he's leading and he's been playing so well, or whether he's just so confident in his preparation. Of course, the French is not the only thing in his repertoire. In fact, it was a little bit of a surprise, and that's why if you're playing fantasy chess, you're getting a lot of points for picking the French. So MVL plays knight c3, the most critical line. These few moves here up to h4, even actually after queen c7, these were also the moves of the game between Alexeyenko and Nepomniachtchi. And in this position, Alexeyenko, whose treatment of the opening I didn't particularly like, in fact, I don't think he had necessarily prepared this. He probably was surprised by Jan's choice. But Alexeyenko played here knight f3, b6, bishop b5. So if you recall, and he didn't get an especially good position. After bishop d7, he played bishop e2, which was a weird move, rather than the more standard bishop d3. And then after bishop a4, we didn't particularly like his position. MVL here on move 8 plays h5, which is the sort of main theory here. h6, rook b1. So rook b1. Rook b1 is a move that actually was not played all that often, but clearly MVL had prepared it. It's a logical move. In some lines, there's CD, CD, queen c3 check, picking up the rook. That's one of the ideas, and of course, in a lot of lines, black will play b6, and the rook on the b file can be very, very useful. In fact, we'll see a little bit later how that comes into play. And it's a little bit of a waiting move, deciding where to put the knight, where to put the bishop. So black plays d6. By the way, I didn't want to show you just this position because queen c3, it is tempting. However, I think here white just plays queen d2, and if black takes, bishop takes. You can also taking with the king is also interesting, actually, with the idea that the king is safe and we can play a4, bishop a3, but both are possible. And I think this is, whether we take with the bishop or the king, a quite pleasant endgame. You have two bishops, and even though the knights might get some kind of an outpost on c4, it's more pleasant for white, especially with that bishop coming to a3. So, but this is of course playable for black. But he plays b6, queen g4. This clearly was still in both players' preparation because they both played fast. Rook g8 looks okay. Of course, you can't castle because of bishop takes h6 if nothing else. Knight f5 is generally not very good because of just a move like eventually the knight will get hit with bishop d3. So normally you play either king f8 or rook g8. And in this case he played rook g8. Knight f5 was probably playable too. Now white plays bishop b5 check, and he plays king f8. So this is a little bit it surprised me a little bit, this sort of sequence with rook g8 and king f8, because if you're going to do that, maybe you might as well play it first, but he decided that this was, I'm sure he had his reasons. So bishop d3, and now he plays bishop a6, which seems like a normal move. He's trying to trade that very strong bishop. Pawn takes c5. And this is, all these positions actually, there's lots of options, and you know, it is surprising that both players were playing so fast and clearly still in their preparation, even though it's a very rich position. So here I did want to point out like that if black, for example, takes on e5, check, knight e2, then they can't take on c5. So you can't just win a pawn because of bishop f4, and the bishop on b8 is attacked twice. So that doesn't work. But of course, you know, even before taking on d3, moves like b takes c5 are possible. In fact, I think Magnus was looking at this. One of the ideas is that if we do this, here bishop takes a6, it looks like you're getting two pieces, but after c4, then the bishop is really in big trouble, and I don't think there's any saving it, right? So here, this, now probably a6, the bishop is just eventually going to run out of squares, and it's probably going to just be a bad position. So b takes c5, you know, is tactically possible, and then, you know, it's an interesting position. I think probably white plays knight f3 to defend their e-pawn, and I kind of like the white position, but it's not clear. Knight, not this knight here to c6, I think, is a move. But white does look a little bit better, right? The king doesn't look that safe for black. So he chooses bishop d3, cd, and knight d7. So now he's made the pawn structure better for white, but it's still, black still has a better pawn structure, right? The problem is that black's king is unsaved, or it's not easy to connect the rooks. So black has sort of concrete problems. Plays d4, pawn takes e5, and he just retreats queen d1. The reason he retreats with queen d1 is that most of the knight moves, like let's say you play knight f3, this is met quite annoyingly with the queen hopping to c2. So it's not that that's game over, but it's obviously very annoying. So he just plays king d1, and he's basically saying that he's got time to do this. All right, so he plays queen a5, bishop d2. He's not really worried about this a pawn falling, right? This is, the next few moves are more about the initiative. Although, you know, the computer looks at it, it's not like white wins immediately or anything like that. Plays rook b8, knight e2, c4. So c4 was actually a big decision, and hard to say whether it was a mistake, but it may have, that people were talking about, which is to bring the king e8, d8, c7. The idea is just to connect the rooks, right? It's sort of a way. There's definitely a chance that Nepo will play something else in the French. I mean, the French is just one thing in his repertoire. If you ask me, he had a good position against Alexeyenko, but he did suffer. He did suffer at some point. In fact, you know, he was completely lost, you know, close to the end. So definitely a chance that he'll try something different. So c4, big decision, and we'll see. Now, MVL starts to play extremely well in this game. So he just castles, rook b6. Rook b6, again, not the only move, but certainly a logical one. Queen c2. Queen c2 is a nice move. The idea of it is that clearly black would like to play something like knight to c6. So if he plays knight c6 now, and the idea is to go king e7 at some point, there's always this queen coming to h7. That's quite annoying, right? Like you can play king e7, queen h7, you'll have to go back king f8. So that's the idea behind queen c2. And so he plays rook h8. And if he played, so I looked at some other moves here, like if he played king e8, for example, then white probably plays a4, which is the same plan that he had in the game. And the idea is to play, you know, eventually bishop c1 and bishop a3. And possibly start with rook b4, or just like not worry about the a pawn and just go for it. So still is a pretty difficult position for black to play. But maybe this was better. So he played rook h8. Now the problem is that he's just starting to be a little slow. a4, king e8, rook to b4. Now that was a really nice maneuver. And the funny thing is that I'm pretty sure this is the square where Alexeyenko also sacrificed an exchange. This basically is an exchange sacrifice. Knight c6, and now he just plays f4. So now the idea here is that he's trying to crash through with f5. And knight c6 is not only to attack the rook, it's also because he's trying to connect his rooks, right? Play king e7. But f4 comes just in time, and that's one of the reasons why putting the knight on e2 instead of f3, left that possibility to play f2 to f4, which was important. But let's look concretely, right? Because this is all very nice, but of course you got to calculate. So what happens if he does take this? So first of all, he can't take here because of queen c3, which this pin ends up with white winning a piece, right? So he can't try to get a pawn also. So he goes queen a6, b5, queen b7, f5. Now, of course, remember, black can never castle, right? They've already moved their king twice. So this is just a very tough position. I mean, white has ideas like bishop b4. White has ideas like pawn takes e6. And it looks actually horrible. I think this is probably just completely lost already. Yeah, someone says c4 was considered as a mistake. I think that is the case. So we were looking at this. Someone in the chat here is saying c4 mistake. Yeah, I mean, I think either knight c6 or rook b6 right away. I mean, there were different attempts. Even queen takes a3, like sort of, it just looks like he wasted too much time. And by closing the position, this closed the position, but it also opened the diagonal. So if the bishop ever gets to a3, then this diagonal is fully open, which is a real problem. So c4, sorry, was probably the beginning of things going very wrong. So going back here, he just retreats knight to e7 to stop f5. But this is sort of an admission that things have gone wrong, right? Like his last move had been knight c6. So now MVL plays the rest of the game really convincingly. He plays rook fb1. Black plays f5. f5 natural move. But again, he's just like one or two tempos too slow. Rook b5. Queen a6, bishop c1. So now he's bringing the bishop to a3, and the idea generally against these f5 plans is that you want to undermine it eventually with g4, and really black doesn't have time to counter this effectively. So he plays king f7, bishop a3, rook b8. He's trying to trade all the rooks, but even that is not quite enough, g4. And so now it looks like, Nepomniachtchi probably could have defended a little bit better here, but it was close to lost. Takes, gf5, rook b1, queen b1. We'll go through the lines. This stays equal material. The problem is that the black king is really weak, and his, the center pawns are so strong for white, including a passed pawn that's already on e5. So just a tough position. MVL plays knight g3. He wants to take on f5 with the knight. Queen b6, knight f5, king f8, and now he plays a very nice move, queen to a1, and he was quite proud of this move in the post-mortem here. The queen is coming to a3 most likely, and that's a really tough invasion to meet. So he plays queen to e6, knight g3. So he simply goes back. He's not worried about losing the pawn, which he does here. Queen takes f4, because the king is actually surprisingly safe from checks, right? Like black has one check, king h3. Somehow the white king always hides. You can find another check. There's actually no check against the king on h3, right? You have to go back to e6 to give a check. So really solid king position. So MVL can simply take the pawn. King e7, queen a3, king d8. There was some other variation here I was going to show. Oh, I think it's the move. The move g6 here was a move that was talked about in the chat a little bit. And Magnus and Jan were looking at this, and David. Now MVL actually gave a line with queen a3, king e8, queen d6, and that line does work. Although even simpler, and I think he would have found this on the board, was queen a5, because the threat of the check on d8 is really strong. So for example, gh5, queen d8, king f7, f5. Now the threat is e6 check, and so black is just way too slow. e6 check, king g7, queen takes. Now let's say king h8, right? Because king f6, queen f7 will trade queens. So king h8, queen e8 here, queen f7 here, and now we can just play. I guess we can play queen g6. Is probably the simplest. Takes, and there's no stopping the pawn, so just winning. So, all right. So going back, yeah. So he played instead queen takes f4, But this is really just completely lost. He can't even get out of the pin because there's a check that you take another pawn. So he's just completely busted here. So he went for a desperate attempt, g5. It really doesn't do anything. And the white pawn is queening, so queen g5. The game could end with either e6, which is quite good, or queen f8, with up a piece. And so, so really nice game by MVL. Puts him in a tie for first, at the halfway mark in the tournament, and now he probably has the wind in his sail a little bit. So yeah, big win for him. I wanted to give you a quick fantasy chess update. After this round, our premium winner was someone with the nickname Alex Nogal, and then the overall winner, sort of premium and non-premium, was Cafoon. And some of the things that were important today were actually like getting the right capture squares that are going to be where there are going to be captures, and it was really, I think today was like f3 and f6. It's hard to guess those, but I think you can get a little advantage if you take time to look at the openings that people play. Amusingly enough today, I'm sure you've seen the videos from Greg Shahade, who's doing the odds. Well, his sister, who is of course a very strong player, U.S. Women's Champion a few times, she was one of the leaders in the pack, so she did very well. So that I thought was interesting and fun. Jan did all right, nothing special. We haven't had any of our local Chess 24 stars winning any of these things yet. What was I going to show you also today? Other games. I was going to show you the Ding Liren, the opening anyway, a little bit, because I thought it was a little symptomatic of what's been going on with him in this tournament. So started with the Catalan, which he's a specialist of, and this is a fairly this is a well-known variation, very theoretical. Knight h5 is a move that became popular. It's sort of a way to get a stonewall. Sometimes you can play with f5. We had a great video series from Magnus in this stuff, sorry, I'm just fixing one thing here. All right. So, so we did have a video series from Magnus where he talks about the stonewall, and that one of the best ways to get a stonewall is in these Catalan openings where you can get your knight to e4 and play f5. But anyway, in this position, so of course you could repeat moves with white, which is a failure, by playing bishop f4, knight h5. But he plays bishop to g5. And of course this was preparation by Ding. I'm sure he's seen his position. And now he plays knight e5. But none of this is very convincing, so I don't know if his preparation went wrong or something else. But I think here h6, and I don't really see what the problems are for black in this position. A position like this I think is reasonable. Maybe white has a little bit of a pull. But in the game, Alexeyenko takes on e5, and now I think that Ding does have some chances. But he doesn't play accurately. So after bishop e7, queen e7, knight f3, that was reasonable. f6 takes, knight takes. Now he makes a good move, I think, bishop h3. Not the only move, but a move that looks quite good. Although, actually, no, that move I liked. Then after rook e8, is where maybe he could have done something better. And after the game, actually, he himself sort of criticized his move here, which was queen to a4. After which, really, black looks like he's just better. So he could have played either knight g5 or knight d4. Both looked pretty good. So, for example, knight d4. Actually, knight d4, there's queen f7. At first, I thought knight d4 would be the best move, but maybe knight g5 is better. So you're threatening e6. I looked at bishop c8, but bishop c8, there's c takes d5, and it's a little bit annoying for black to play this position. If they take here, queen takes c6, bishop h3, knight h3, queen takes e2. But this is the kind of position where you're going to suffer, I think, as black. Queen c2. Trading queens is definitely a worse endgame. I mean, just because that d pawn is so weak. probably holdable, but it's not fun to play, and this seems to be up Ding's alley. So that's one way to play. And, I don't know what else you can do on c takes d5. There's not too many options. I mean, c takes d5, there's queen c7, and again, it looks like a pleasant endgame. So that seemed to be fairly straightforward and would give Ding a reasonable position. But he played queen a4 here on move 21. And after c5, strong move, he must have just kind of miscalculated this. I think he said in the interview actually that he missed it. And after queen a7, which he didn't play, queen c7 simply, I think, and it's not a fun position, right? The rook is coming to a8. So c5, good move, and now he finds a way. I mean, he does play well enough, I guess, to kind of keep the balance here, although black had other chances, but now he never has really a chance to even be better, right? He just sort of managed to make a draw from this position. And maybe Alexeyenko had better tries, but the game just really simplified to an equal ending. So this, of course, is a draw, and they agreed to a draw a few moves later. So really, Ding Liren seems to be a little bit out of form. And then another game that was a little bit surprising is this Fabiano Caruana game, and I'll just go through the opening quickly. Started as a Petrov, Hao Wang, sticking to his Petrov, and Fabiano goes back to the knight c3 lines. He's played a ton of games in this. Frankly, I don't really understand this line because it seems to me like black has solved the problems there. But clearly Fabiano, who's a huge, opening specialist, disagrees. So I just fail to see the advantage in all these variations that black plays, in particular this c5 plan. And so all of this has been played countless times. There's games. There's actually a game of Fabiano himself all the way up to here. Actually, the novelty here that he played was knight takes d2. So he himself had a game with bishop takes d2. He also had a game where instead of c4 he played a3. So he's already had a bunch of games here. But I just, I didn't really see the advantage for white in this game at all. In fact, at some point it looked like black was maybe to be preferred here. So it wasn't too messy of a game really. Nothing else really happened. This all stayed fairly simple. Relatively easy for these guys to calculate lines like this. And ultimately, I guess black was actually trying to win, but of course this is a forced, a draw eventually. So not the most convincing tournament for Fabiano so far. And this one, in some of the games he had huge opening preparation, got a big edge. That did not happen today. And then the last game was Grischuk against Anish. And in this game, again, Anish seemed to have a little bit of a pull. This, I guess I can show how it came, but this is a slightly unusual, but it's been played variation of the English where black has nice squares, but white is ahead in development and has sort of an initiative. But again, h5, which by the way Lawrence Trent had correctly predicted. And although it looks aggressive, after d4 he's forced to take, and so it actually becomes a fairly simple position really. Not especially after queen g4, which begs for queens to be traded. So, but Anish here played kind of I guess maybe not that aggressive move, bishop f4, which let black trade queens. I do wonder if he could, a more ambitious player maybe could have tried to play knight e2 and just see if you can keep queens on the board and play this game. Where's the black king going to go? Is the black king going to go on the king side, queen side? It's still a very rich position. But after the queen trade, a little bit less so. And Grischuk managed to stay out of trouble here. In fact, it was kind of prosaic draw. He did find a move d4 here, which just forces a trade of everything, and so yeah. So these were today's games, and maybe I'll bring back the standings here. We're halfway through the tournament. We're hoping that the tournament will continue from our perspective anyway, as how do I say, as fans around the world. Of course, you know, we're lucky to see this happen, and but then you know, but then it seems like that's likely to happen. And at the halfway mark, I'm looking for my standings here. Where did I? Here we go. Sorry about that. All right. So at the halfway mark, I don't know that anybody would have predicted that we would have these two leaders, that Ding Liren would be at the bottom and that Fabiano would just be in the middle. But a lot can still happen, right? There's only 1 point. So if Fabiano beats either one of the leaders, he's back, you know, in a tie with at least one of them. So it's certainly too early to count Fabiano out. Of course, it's certainly getting very late for Ding Liren, probably too late to make a comeback. But next round tomorrow, we have Fabiano playing against MVL, and he's white, so that's a chance for him to get right back into it. And Nepomniachtchi is going to try to avenge his loss of today by playing white. He's getting the white pieces against Anish. So they should both be interesting games. By the way, tomorrow I think we are going to have the very first battle between languages. So after the games, we're going to have a team of 3 people, which will include me, play on an English language team against a team of Spaniards, Spanish-speaking team that will have, I believe, David Anton, Pepe, and Divis. So the famous people from our Spanish side. And on our side, it's going to be myself, it's going to be Sam Shanklin, and it's going to be Greg Shahade. So it should be a lot of fun. The idea is that we have players who can talk a lot. So we're gonna talk our way into a victory, hopefully. It's going to be an all-play-all, you know, blitz game, sort of a banter blitz battle. So it should be a lot of fun. I do believe Magnus will be back. It is my hope that Magnus will be back tomorrow in the commentary. And that should be a lot of fun as well. In the meantime, in less than 30 minutes, we have Sam Shanklin coming in for a workshop. I hope you will enjoy that and stay tuned. And yeah, it was a pleasure to speak with you guys again today, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
Let's not just look at openings move by move, but let's try to understand a little something and look at a few typical structures that can arise out of a bunch of main openings. And hopefully, understanding these structures and the typical plans and the ideas will help you a little bit in your own practice. Laurent, what structures will we cover?
So first of all, we'll cover one very famous structure, Carlsbad structure, which can arise from the Queen's Gambit mainly, but from other openings as well, like the London system or the Caro-Kann.
Yes, fond childhood memories of the Carlsbad. Thank you. It's important for everyone to understand what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. Then we'll have a look at some Ruy Lopez, actually, which is the classical line, not the Marshall or the Berlin, but this classical position where white plays d4 and sometimes even goes like with the pawn on d5, or even sometimes taking on c5. We'll see some nice game of Bobby Fischer here, and some nice cup of game after d5.
Here you will share your Russian upbringing with us. You have all the classical education in the Ruy Lopez. Some nice examples there, hopefully. Then we move on to the French structure, which I don't understand particularly well, but this position has always intrigued me. Who's better and why? What are the plans? Why can white hope for an advantage? Is a space advantage such a big deal? And the French structure can of course arise mainly via the French after moves like knight c3, knight d2 or e5, but we also have a small detour into the Caro-Kann, which is very similar but not quite the same. I've always been intrigued by this
because the bishop can go out here, bishop f5, and it's of course assist times for black, but it's not, life is not that simple, as we will see. And the last topic will be the symmetrical positions, which kind of arise basically from different move order, like the French exchange French or Petrov, showing right now, or even the Berlin Rookie 1, where we will see an unfinished masterpiece from the current world champion Magnus Carlsen.
Right. Symmetrical positions here, we mean these positions where either side is missing an e-pawn that are very common in today's practice. So this series is not intending to cover every pawn structure imaginable, but we hope we show some that are instructive and relevant, and we hope that you'll enjoy it. Maybe even learn something.
Question on Twitter from Damas. I should not have pronounced that. That was a bit of a trap, yeah?
For those of you who are new to chess, it might look like ba3 is an illegal move here, because white advances pawn 2 squares, not 1. But it's a little something we call en passant. And you can do that, but you have to do it instantly. You can't wait for a move, like let's say play king e7, king g2, and now try, because I'm gonna do it.
I'm sorry. This is too funny for words.
This is a software glitch? I'm pretty sure there's not a lot.
Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence. Yeah, I'll play 4 against Lawrence. And now he's going to play something against me which we discussed at length during the course of my stay. Yeah, he told me this is excellent. d5, this was what I was kind of hoping for, because now I think e5 is quite. No, Lawrence, this is not how chess works. Sadly, it would be much, much more fun if chess actually worked like this. But I don't think it does. Or maybe it does. Well, that's me regretting what I just said. How did I get from there to here is a little bit beyond me. And what's worse, I will never hear the end of it. My quality of life has just gone downhill tremendously, because I'm actually sharing the office with the guy.